Hey guys, it's Wade here with you again. I wanted to do a follow-up video on my throttle as far as the throttle quadrant, the actual throttle handle, and installing the throttle cables and the mixture cable. I have 3 cables total. I have 2 coming from the engine compartment that you'll see in just a minute. That's the throttle and the mixture, of course. And then I have 1 slave cable that's down here below that comes off of the lever for the throttle, and it goes to the back seat. So I did end up using the throttle handle that I machined. It worked out fine. I did label the throttle. And then I'm going to go over some of the components here as far as the left armrest. I'm going over these components because essentially I decided that since I was putting the throttle quadrant in with the throttle cable and the mixture cable, I might as well just go ahead and get the left armrest knocked out, pretty much the left sidewall of the aircraft going aft, and then I'll restart on the engine again as far as the install on that. So it's been a few week journey here as far as getting everything pretty much dialed in and installed. Quick rundown on the left pilot armrest. Again, the throttle and the mixture. The cables are mounted. It might be a little bit difficult to show you some things. As you can see, I have a storage compartment, which I have the cover on here. Now, as you can kind of surmise because of the way the cover looks, the storage compartment actually goes underneath the armrest on each end, and then this hinges up. It's about 2 inches deep and 6 inches, so this is good for pens and eyeglasses and any other small stuff. This is about 3 inches deep, and it's about 6.5 inches long. So a pretty good little bit of storage. This is removable. These 3 connectors right here actually go to the oil heat sub panel, which sits right in this area, and you'll see that in a little bit. You can also see this cable here and this cable here. There's 3 cables that go to these 3 associated switches for the oil heat system, and there will be 3 actuators in this area down in here and over in here that connect to the 3 cables that go back to the valves on the oil heat system. You can see the wood bracket. It does have some phenolic attached to the sidewall. That's on my blog if you wish to see how this is constructed. It's covered with a few plies of fiberglass on each side, and then there's through holes that the cables are then mounted to. These connectors right here are for the bottom seat pad and the back seat pad. I have heated seats in both the front and the back seat. On the front seat, the heated seat connectors come out on the left side, on the back there on the right side. All the major wiring for the entire aircraft, I follow Bob Knuckles. There is no major cabling except for antennas going aft throughout the entire aircraft on the left side, only on the right, and that's to mitigate noise. So all the electronics you see here pretty much are the only electrical components that I have on the left side of the aircraft. So I have the throttle quadrant again, that's installed. I did have to cut these nubs, which I talked about before. I ended up just going bare on quote unquote on the cable here. I just pinned it in the center, and that actually worked the best, and I've got actually plenty of clearance. I did cover it with an abrasive resistant heat shrink that I got from McMaster-Carr. Worked out pretty well. You can see right here kind of that's reflecting the yellow off the tip of my trusty pointer stick. That is something that I designed. It's 40 thousandths aluminum. I'll show it connected when I put the armrest here on in just a little bit. The knob for this lever is actually in the storage compartment. It has to go on after the armrest is put in place, but this knob sits right there on the top. It's screwed in place, but this is the friction lock, the new friction lock. So this replaces this little lever right here, which sits down very low. I mean, it would be doable, but I just wanted to optimize it, so I made this little lever. I machined both the lever and then the standoff to create this friction, and it works pretty darn well. So that's throttle friction and mixture friction. Here are the relays that I installed. Right down here is a little hole with a grommet in it. That is for the temperature probe. That will tell me on my EFIS what the actual temperature is in the air ducts for the heating system. The cup holder is hard installed as well, so that's permanently installed again, unless for whatever reason any of these components have to come out, they're staying in. Over here is the forward heat panel. So what this has, it's kind of hard to see probably from this angle here, but what you have is the seat warmer for the front seat, and then the seat warmer, I control it for the back seat just because those things can pull a fair amount of amperage, so I wanted to control that. And there's also a push button right here. So I can either have the heated seats for heating, and that would be with this button in the up position, or I can push it in the down position and then I control the output of the oil heat pump in the back. This whole entire system down in here, this is a PWM board for the oil pump, and then I've terminated the wires for the throttle quadrant. So those are all done. I actually added 2 wires. I'm going to try to move the camera to see if I can get a shot of this. And I actually added a button just because I had a little bit of space when I climbed in here to check how the throttle height, as far as the handle was, compared to my leg. And my leg sits about in this area here. Again, why I didn't want to go with that little lever down here for the friction lock. But when my hand is resting on the throttle, I noted that it was right on this little corner here. So I went ahead and installed a push to talk. I made a little bit more of a extension on the top of the cable guide, and then I made this little push to talk button, which I'll use my pinky to actuate. Now I actually have a couple other buttons about that same size that I got with the Infinity control stick that I can put in there. I wanted to note on the throttle lever and the mixture lever, as far as manipulating the cable and how that functions and correlates with the levers on the fuel injection servo hanging off the engine, that it took quite a bit of machinations and a number of holes to get this thing right, because with the 3-inch travel on these cables, I could only dial in the rod end so much, and then it became a function of the pivot with these levers. However, through a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth and some other things that I'm probably not too proud of, these levers are exactly matched. I should say almost exactly matched. So when this hits the stop here, it's hitting the stop on the throttle, and the same thing on the mixture side. The one thing that I do have to work just a little bit, and I know I'm probably being a little anal here, is that when this comes back to the stop here, I'm about 5/1000ths of an inch off. You can slide a piece of printer paper in between the stop and the lever on the throttle body back there. I've also got the micro switches for both the front side. This is a double pole micro switch for wide open throttle, or as it's getting close to wide open throttle. This controls specifically right now one circuit, which is for the landing brake. So if I have to go around and I go full throttle, my landing brake is down, it automatically throws the landing brake up. That's a Jack Williamson design. I bought his landing brake. There's a bank of 3 micro switches here, and they control various things: gear up, gear down. You know, they're combined with the canopy warning. One specifically goes to the warning annunciation AG6, and so that when I'm throttled back, it lets me know if the ram air scoop is open. It warns me on that. And then another one of these switches is specifically for the automatic gear extension. So if I'm throttled back and I'm in the landing configuration, this is part of those 4 parameters to fire off the nose gear and bring it down if I fail to do it and forget. Now let me throw the armrest on and I'll show you that. So here we have the left front armrest in place. As you can see, we have the elbow pad in place as well. Obviously, the main difference between what this looks like and now and what it looked like 3 weeks ago is the paint on this armrest. Also, I had to put a backdrop here. This is 20,000 stainless steel. I still have to tweak just the very ends on each side of this throttle friction lock. Just, you know, about the last 3/4 of an inch on each side. It's jammed just because of the thickness of this, so I got to make that slot just a hair bigger. But this is working. I'm very happy with how that looks and how it's functioning as well. It's definitely going to be a lot better than having that little nub that's going to be down here right about where the top of the seat is. This gets you a little bit closer look at the forward heat sub panel. Then over here, I've done a video on the oil heat sub panel, but there it is installed, and the position in the armrest there. I went ahead and just left the top of the nubs and trimmed this area right here for this cable. So originally I was going to try to cover those nubs up, but I just left them as part of the top of the armrest. I did add one more hard point, which I didn't point out when I had the cover off, the armrest off, but there's another hard point right here. If I had thought about it, I would have put in the fire extinguisher, which goes right into here. And then again, you have the elbow pad that's velcroed in place. If I take that off, I can lift that up, and there's the storage right there. So that's it for the left front pilot armrest. I'll take you to the back seat now. We'll check out the guy in back throttle setup. I'm going to start my discussion on the guy in back throttle, freehanding the camera. So something happened that's kind of a significant emotional event for me running these cables for the throttle and the mixture cables, is I actually ran out of space in this bird. I had to run the throttle and the mixture cable going through the front seat, also the slave throttle cable for the guy in back, gallon back, through the front seat obviously as well, in different spots. I had to run them across the face of the oil heat exchanger, so I ran them through this Adele right here. And then as you can see, I've got a fairly thick piece of rubber that zip tied all three of them in place as they cross over the top of this bulkhead here. So this Adele clamp is held in place by a 3/16 inch AN3 bolt that also holds this in place. Now this is kind of key in this situation because this is where the edge of the cover for this guy right here, as it comes down, the cover rests and kind of wraps around at least the first half of these three cables on this Adele clamp, and it rests right here. The other part of the cover rests on this lip right here of the thigh support. So from here to here, which is about 7 or 8 inches, and that's, you'll see in a bit. Well, here's the cover right here. I've got carbon fiber. I've also got some Kevlar in there, a couple plies of bid. Then you have the converted. This was originally the same style as the front seat, the pilot throttle quadrant, but to make this work with a slaved cable, I had to make this a reverse style unit. This lower cable right here is the slave throttle cable. It comes up, loops around, and then comes back over here. There's a bracket back there that's glued to the sidewall. It's actually a 9-layer bid composite bracket, and then I use the click bond glue to glue it to the sidewall. So here you have the, and I'll show you the actuation here in just a minute, but again, I converted this to pivot here in the middle as compared to the front where it pivots on the bottom. I also obviously shortened this lever quite a bit. This is the highest point. It does not go all the way to the front or the back. Being a reverse configuration, that really throws this quite far, and I really don't want it to go all the way to the front or the back to hit the stops, because I want to make sure it's always free and clear for the front seat throttle quadrant to always ensure that it can hit its stops. I also want to make something perfectly clear. This is not optimized for the seating position of the back seater, the passenger, to manipulate just as a normal throttle quadrant. This is for emergency purposes only. I do not like the idea of the backseat passenger not having controls. I don't have rudder pedals in this aircraft, but they do have now a throttle and you know, your pitch and your roll. So you know, that's pretty good, but definitely need some throttle actuation. Now, if you're thinking about what about the friction lock, I'm actually going to run a cable that connects up in this area here. It's basically just like a pull ring that will go through and it'll connect to the friction lock, so that in case anything does happen, they could just pull that cable and unlock the friction lock. So here you have the throttle and the mixture cable going through the back seat bulkhead, and this is a two-part 100% fill PET G, which is a kind of like an ABS plastic. It's a strong plastic. It's got some clamp fits in there that when it's shoved in there, and then it's held in place with a screw, but it's press fit in there. But these are basically cable guides and protectors for these cables going through this hard edge on the, you know, it's kind of a knife edge on each side of this slot here in the back seat. You can actually see the throttle cable right there. But that's it. So you've got the throttle, the mixture cable coming in from the firewall, and then you have the slave throttle cable for the guy in back throttle quadrant that's looped around. So I'll show you everything now with the cover on. Actually, I'll actuate the throttle, but I'm going to go over on the other side. So again, the throw, as far as the pivot on this throttle lever, there's probably about at least a good 1/4 inch, maybe 3/16 inch gap right there. But then you have full throttle there. But there's the actuation on the guy in back, gallon back throttle. So here we have the guy in back, gallon back throttle with the armrest put back into place, and then of course obviously the cover is over the throttle quadrant. As you can see, this cover also comes down. It covers the throttle cable rod end as it transitions, so nothing can get in there and gum it up. It covers the tail end of the oil heat exchanger. Right in this area right here is that Adele clamp, so this rests right on that Adele clamp. Now this is 2 plies. Let me back up. This is originally 2 plies of bid here. I have 1 click bond over here that supports it on this side, and then I have 1 rivet nut that this screw is threaded into right here that supports it there. Then pretty much everything else is just in this area back here, this area right along here where it rests on the front lip of the thigh support, and then that Adele clamp. So this has 2 plies of bid here that go up and overlap. You can actually see a little bit of the overlap right in here. It's ghosted a little bit on the side. And then in this area right in here going down, just covered by this carbon fiber, is a ply of Kevlar, and that's to ensure that, you know, getting in and out over the years, that it does help with the thickness and rigidity. The carbon fiber is both for looks, and then also, of course, it adds some rigidity to this whole structure down here. If anybody's coming in and they kind of bang against this thing, or they step on it a little bit, it's covering up those 3 throttle and mixture cables. That's pretty much it for the workings of the throttle quadrant. Now I'll take you back to the engine compartment. All right, welcome to the engine compartment, guys. I'm going to start on the mixture side. Now, the only way that I could get this fuel injection servo to fit underneath my cowling was to face it rearwards and mount it straight to the cold air induction plenum. This cold air induction, while obviously will probably give me a good performance boost, it's quite a pain in the butt, I have to tell you, as far as getting this thing underneath a cowling. The mixture lever on the fuel servo here, it's linked, so forward on the handle moves this forward towards Rich, and then aft on the handle we'll move that aft towards idle cutoff. You can see I have a 3/16 inch mount here, the bracket for the cable, And then I have these bolts are installed. They do have the holes in there. I do have these safety wired. I don't have them safety wired yet on the other side. I did add a little bit of extra onto this bracket. It shoots off just a hair over to one side, a couple inches. And then I've added an Adele clamp because I have to bring in the fuel hose all the way from the other side, from the right front side of the engine back, and then come over in from the left side. That was the only way that I could get clearance for the servo. I'll discuss the fuel servo and this air induction tube in a different video when I cover the Ram air can. On the other side of the Silverhawk fuel injection servo, we have the lever and the cable rod end for the throttle. And so this right here would be idle cutoff, and then this right here would be full throttle. See if I can get a shot of it. If you can see back there, I have this runoff hose here for the sniffle valve, which is that blue thing right there kind of in the way. But there's a bracket that's attached to this bracket right here. This is a 1/8 inch 70-75 aluminum bracket. I wanted it to have a little bit more strength because it is cantilevered back here just a bit. Also, you can see here I did borrow the back end of this bracket to mount the Adele clamp that routes the runoff hose for that sniffle valve. So that's it. That's the overview on the throttle and mixture cable install. Thanks for watching. Cheers.